It sounds like Ty Dillon will be headed to Kaulig Racing in 2024, and Corey Heim has been penalized for his actions at Phoenix Raceway. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're ahead by starting to talk about Busch Beer. As it was announced on Monday, that Busch Beer says it has a permanently put Kevin Harvick likeness on one of its finishing tanks at its Anheuser-Busch Brewery in St. Louis. This is really cool to see. Obviously, Busch Beer hasn't been involved in Kevin Harvick's final year. Obviously, Kevin Harvick has officially retired from racing in the NASCAR Cup Series and will join the Fox Sports booth in 2024. Nonetheless, I think it's really cool to see. He's gotten a lot of honors. Kevin Harvick, I think, got a Max Verstappen helmet from Mobil 1 as well, which I think that's pretty cool, by the way. So nonetheless, really awesome to see that Busch Beer was getting involved in Kevin Harvick's final season. Really awesome and really great stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona 500. As it was announced and reported by the Daytona 500 that 98% of the tickets for the Daytona 500 have been already sold. This is really cool to see. Obviously, Daytona 500 is the biggest race every year for the NASCAR Cup Series. And it's really awesome to see there's a really good chance of possibly in the coming days and weeks, the Daytona 500 is going to sell out. They may at this point have to build temporary seats just so that more people can show up to Daytona 500, because I would love to go to Daytona 500 next year in 24 or even 2025 in the future. So nonetheless, this is really awesome to see, and glad to see that the Daytona 500 is nearly sold out. Really awesome and great stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. As it was officially announced that North Wilkesboro's repave has officially begun. Obviously, a lot of people are kind of disappointed that North Wilkesboro is getting repaved, but a big reason it is getting repaved is because they're running the service that's been down there since 1981, and during the All-Star race and during the week as well when they were at North Wilkesboro, especially during some of the late model racing, they were having cracks come through, and they had to put like grip strips throughout the track to make sure the track held up. So as much as it is disappointing to see that they are repaving the track, it had to be done, unfortunately. Nonetheless, it is good to see that they are going ahead and getting it done with the repave. It's disappointing, but nonetheless, it's not surprising and not shocking. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joel Edmonds. As Joel Edmonds confirmed after the NASCAR Cup Series race on Sunday that he'll be retiring from full-time spotting and will only be part-time in 2024. Joel Edmonds has been a spotter in NASCAR for a very long time. He spotted for Gray Biffle for many years and also spotted for Eric Almirola. So kind of like Eric Almirola, who's retiring full-time NASCAR Cup Series racing, he is also retiring as well, that being Joel Edmonds. Congrats to old Joel Edmonds on an incredible career as a spotter. Wishing him the best of luck, whatever he does. He'll probably still work at Eric Almirola wherever he goes in 2024 because Eric Almirola does still want to race. Nonetheless, glad to see that Joel Edmonds gets to go and ride off into the sunset. He's not fully retiring, but he's retiring from being a full-time spotter, which I think is not a bad decision if you ask me, considering what is going on. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about James Henchcliffe. As it was announced yesterday that James Henchcliffe will join Pfaff Racing in IMSA in 2024. James Henchcliffe, who's a veteran of IndyCar and also I think has done some racing in basically some sports car racing before in the past, is going to join Pfaff Racing, a really solid organization I think is in the GT class. I think James Henchcliffe is going to do a really solid job. Obviously, he's a really good announcer, but I think he's also going to run the Royals 24 next year in 2024. So nonetheless, this is really awesome and great stuff, and really happy and glad to see that we're going to see James Hinchcliffe running with Pfaff Racing in 2024. Really awesome stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Colton Herta and Brennan Hartley. As it was announced, I believe, on Tuesday that Colton Herta and Brennan Hartley are going to be driving for Wayne Taylor Racing in 2024. Obviously, a big reason why Colton Herta is going to be driving for Wayne Taylor Racing because of the connection with Andretti Autosport. But both drivers, I believe, have driven in the top ranks. I think Colton Herta was with BMW last year with Ray Hall's team in 2023. So really cool to see that he's going to be with Wayne Taylor Racing next year. And it's also great to see that Brendan Hartley is back in a top ride. I think both drivers are really going to help this team out. They're going to be expanding 2 cars. There's going going to be a 10 car and a 40 car. I think Brennan Hartley's in the 10, and Colton Herta is going to be in the 40 next year. They've also got Jordan Taylor returning to the team, which I think this is going to be a really strong and stout lineup in 2024. And nonetheless, really awesome and glad to see both of these drivers are going to be running. Congratulations to both of them, and good to see that they are both going to be running in these cars in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As Richard Childress Racing revealed yesterday that Kyle Busch has a new exhibit at Richard Childress Racing, which will basically to commemorate Kyle Busch's first year at Richard Childress Racing. Kyle Busch this year has scored 3 victories, those coming at Auto Club, Talladega, and Gateway. He did struggle in the second half of the year, but you look at the success that Kyle Busch has already had with the RCR, I don't know how he's going to do going into the 2024 season, considering RCR kind of struggled in the second half of the year. Nonetheless, it's really awesome to see that Richard Childress Racing is honoring Kyle Busch's first year. Pretty awesome and exciting stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Haley. As Justin Haley put out a tweet yesterday talking about that he has officially begun his work at Rickware Racing. Justin Haley, of course, is joining Rickware Racing in the 2024 season and will drive the 51 car in 2024. I think expectations for Justin Haley are going to be very interesting because in my opinion, Justin Haley is a very talented driver and Rickware Racing has shown some pretty big signs of improvement in the last year. I think they are going to have an improved year in 2024, and I think Justin Haley is going to be a big part of trying to help this team grow and develop as well. I'm excited for him. I'm glad to see Justin Haley is going to be driving for the team, and we'll see what he can do in 2024 with Rickware. Wish him the best of luck, and nonetheless glad to see that he'll be joining the Rickware Racing family in the 2024 season. Really awesome and really great stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Snowball Derby. As we officially got some early entries who will be running the 2024 Snowball Derby. Here are some notable entries. You have William Sawalich, Eric Jones, Derek Thorne, Derek Kraus, Derek Griffin, Carson Osabar, Travis Braden, Sammy Smith, William Byron, Bubba Pollard, Luke Fenhouse, Noah Grace, Freda Jones Racing, Jake Garcia, Carson Quaffle, Connor Jones, Stephen Noss, Jake Finch, Ryan Priest, and Ty Majeski are among the drivers who will be competing in this year's Snowball Derby. This is a really strong lineup this year. If I had to put the favorites down right now, I would say Noah Gragson, who's won the Snowball Derby before. He's a favorite to win it this year. You've got William Byron, who I think has also won the Snowball Derby before. He's got a shot to do it. Ryan Priest, I think, is going to be a threat. And I also think Eric Jones is going to be a threat, who's also won the Snowball Derby previously in 2012. I think this is a really strong combination of drivers for the Snowball Derby going into 2024, and I think it is going to be a really fun Snowball Derby, which of course is happening at the end of this month. Looking forward to it, really excited about that, and nonetheless really happy and glad to see that those drivers will be running the Snowball Derby in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2024 ARCA schedule. As on Wednesday evening, late in the evening as a matter of fact, the 2024 ARCA schedule was finally revealed. And here's how the schedule is going to look going into 2024. The season is going to kick off at Daytona on February 17th, followed by Phoenix on March the 8th. Then they'll be raced at Talladega on April 20th and follow that up by going to Dover for the first time in a long time on April the 26th. After that, the race at Kansas on May the 4th, then the race at Charlotte on May the 24th. After that, the race at Iowa on June 14th, which will be joining the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series as well. Then the race at Mid-Ohio on June 21st. Then the race at Berlin on June 29th, followed by IRP on July 19th. Then the race at Salem on July, I believe, the 27th or the 21st. Then the race at Elko on August the 3rd. Then the race in Michigan on August 16th, and go to Springfield the basically same week on August the 18th. After that, the race in Milwaukee on August 25th, followed by DuQuoin on September 1st. Then the race at Watkins Glen on September 13th, then go to Bristol on September 13th for Watkins Glen, September 19th for Bristol. Then the race at Kansas on September 27th, and follow that up by going to Toledo on October 5th. This is a really, really strong lineup for ARCA this year. Unfortunately, you notice Pocono is not on the schedule for the first time in many, many years. They did release statement thanking all the fans who've come out to the racetrack. They are disappointed, but they respect the decision ARCA has made. I think this is a very interesting ARCA season. I think there's only 3 races that are also going to be on FS2 in 2024, which is very, very interesting. Nonetheless, this is a solid ARCA schedule going into the 2024 year. Hopefully the racing can be as good as it was. I think ARCA this year, despite the fact that, the broadcast could definitely be a lot better, trying to call Jamie Little a little bit here, I think that the broadcast could definitely be better, but I think the racing itself was actually decent when they were racing. Sometimes they did get strung out for sure, but I think there was good moments of racing. And go back to Michigan, where I thought the racing in Michigan was solid overall. Nonetheless, really glad to see the ARCA schedule has finally been revealed, and really happy to see that we have an ARCA schedule ready, because they've kind of been reeling dates off and on. Glad to see that we finally do have a schedule for 2024 officially revealed. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about motorsports games once again. Now, I was really not hoping to talk about motorsports games, but unfortunately have to talk about them once again due to IndyCar. So there was a report that came out, I think, on Tuesday or Wednesday, that the IndyCar team has been laid off, and the BTCC license is officially gone. Obviously, you've been paying attention over the last few months. Motorsports Games lost the NASCAR license. That license went to iRacing. Now, IndyCar has not completely given up on the license of Motorsports Games just yet, but they're probably legally waiting, because it sounds like they are going to back out, according to Mike Straw. Obviously, Motorsports Games is one of the worst gaming companies I have seen in the history of gaming, and we all know what exactly has gone down. And the only thing we know is that they're releasing Le Mans Ultimate, which that game is coming out on PC, so it's really, in my opinion, who's going to pay for it anyways, especially with the reputation that Motorsports Games does have. Who's going to pay for the game? I don't think anybody's really going to pay for the game, to be honest with you. I just think with how bad of a reputation Motorsports Games has had with everything, they're likely going to go bankrupt here in the near future, because they're not releasing any games. Apparently, their most recent investor call that they had, which are required to have investor calls, they apparently ended the call abruptly. So while I'm disappointed by the situation, I'm not surprised about it. It's disappointing to see the IndyCar fans are going to have to wait once again. But again, it has to be done, sadly, because, again, no one's going to buy any of their games. Their games have been bad. NASCAR 21 was terrible, and they really haven't released any games. And as much as I think the IndyCar game, it'd been nice to see it come out, I don't trust Motorsports Games in any shape or form. So I think it's a good decision that they're not going to release it anyways. I feel bad for the team over in Australia, because they've actually, from what I understand, worked hard on the game, from people who've said it. But I think it's not, unfortunately, it is what it is at this point. It's disappointing, but not a major shock and major surprise, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Money Team. Now, on Instagram, there was a post saying that the Money Team, it sounded like, had been shut down. Joseph Srigley, who of course works at TobyChristie.com, put out a tweet saying that Wayne Akmoody, who works with the Money Team as one of the co-owners of the team, has said that the Money Team has in fact not shut down, and they are actually working on their 2024 plans. I believe the last time that the Money Team showed up to the racetrack was, I believe, at Circuit of the Americas, or maybe at Charlotte when they had Connor Daly behind the wheel. Obviously, Connor Daly basically revealed that he was no longer going to be racing with this team after, I think, around the Indy weekend. He kind of revealed he was no longer going to be with this team and organization. Now, the Money Team has made a few select starts, and they were supposed to have Haly also run with them in the Daytona 500 in 2023, but they did not budge. The question now is that, are they going to be a better team if they do show up? I don't know at this point. And a question I have is, if they do run in 2024, how many races are they going to run? I think they're only going to run a few select races in the 2024 season, simply based off the fact that the Money Team just doesn't, because of the charter agreement. I don't think a lot of these unchartered teams don't show up to the racetrack as much as normal. It is good to see the Money Team is going to be showing up. I'm just disappointed to see that, again, it's good to see that they are going to be showing up. I just feel a little disappointed for some fans who thought they were going to shut down. But I'm not surprised and shocked that they're going to still be around. They're probably going to run the Daytona 500. They're probably going to run the Chicago Street Course. There probably a couple other big marquee races in 2024 that do end up being paid. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see that the Money Team is going to be sticking around in the 2024 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about High Limit Racing. As High Limit Racing officially announced on Tuesday, they are going to become a National Sprint Car Touring Series in 2024. They are going to have a 50-plus race schedule for 2024, and there are going to be bigger purses in 2024 than they even had in 2023. For those who have been paying attention, High Limit Racing is a series run by Kyle Larson and Brad Sweet. And in recent weeks, they have officially purchased the All-Star Circuit of Champions, which of course was Tony Stewart's Sprint Car Series. And they are going to have a lot of drivers joining that series from the All-Star Circuit Champions. Of course, are going to be part of the High Limit Racing Series in 2024. The goal Kyle Larson has always had with the High Limit Racing Series in the last year or two is to try to create bigger purse money. Obviously, you do have a lot of drivers who've been kind of frustrated with the lack of money coming in for like the World of Outlaws, for other series as well. And that's the goal that Brad Sweet and Kyle Larson have, is to try to bring in a lot of purse money for these drivers coming in so that they can be able to compete and they can continue doing what they love to do, which of course is race. I think this is a massive and a huge story overall, and it's great to see that they are going to be going national in 2024. The goal, I think, for them is eventually become the top series. I think they want to become the top individual series in the sprint car world. They're going to be going against the World of Outlaws. There was some talk that maybe David Gravel was going to join this series as well in 2024, but David Gravel is going to be sticking around, of course, next year with the World of Outlaws, try to get to 100 career-plus victories in the World of Outlaws, and then maybe in the future he is going to show up in the series in the near future. Nonetheless, it's really awesome to see and pretty cool to see that High Limit Racing is officially going to be going national in 2024 with bigger prizes and bigger purse money as well, which has been the goal for Kyle Larson and for his team as well. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Roger Kroeger. Now, yesterday, Bob Pockrass put out a tweet in regards to Roger Kroeger, and in that tweet, you notice something interesting. He says that Roger Kroeger's 2024 plans are to be announced. Now, according to Bob Pockrass, a comment, I think, on Instagram to somebody, he kind of said that Roger Kroeger already knows what he's going to be doing for 2024. So now the big question revolves around where is Roger Kroeger going to be going in 2024? Well, Roger Kroeger does have a few potential options. Let's start off in the truck series. The first thing to think about is Spire Motorsports. Roger Kroeger has driven for Spire Motorsports in the past in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, drove for them in 2022, and he did some decent runs with that team, nearly getting a top 10 in his debut in the Truck Series in 22 at Gateway. Also, Roger, I think, had some pretty solid runs in the Truck Series here. He only got 4 top 10 finishes, which isn't the greatest in the world, but there were races this year where some of those times where he unfortunately didn't finish where he should have, where he was legit competing for the victory and was impressive at times. Inspire Motorsports obviously has purchased Kyle Busch Motorsports, so they're expanding. So I think this would be a really good team for Roger Kroeger to end up going to next year. There's other teams he could go to. Nice Motorsports, I think, still has one truck team that is available currently at the moment, though I do think there's a chance Laws on because of Zotto Park's funding that he could return to the team next year. But there are other potential possibilities that could end up coming into place for Roger, especially in Xfinity Series. He could go to Kaulig Racing, perhaps. He could also go to Hendrick Motorsports in 2024 if the 17 team was to expand, but I don't know if they're going to expand that team full-time in 2024. At this point, though, I believe the Roger Kroeger will have a ride here in the not-so-distant future announced, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to where he ends up going in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the next-gen test at Phoenix. Now, Corey LaJoie revealed that he will be one of the 6 drivers who will be getting in the next-gen test that's taking place later this year. There is a next-gen test that's going to be taking place from December 5th to 6th at Phoenix International Raceway. The goal is to test the underbody and transaxle to eliminate shifting. One of the biggest goals in the next-gen car, especially on the short tracks, is NASCAR wants to find a way to get rid of the shifting because shifting has been a big proponent issue with the next-gen car. It is no secret that short track racing and short oval racing in NASCAR has been a little bit lackluster in the last couple of years. We have seen some improvement. I think the race at Martinsville was the best race that track has seen with the next-gen car, and I think Phoenix actually was a solid race as well. And I think Goodyear has started put stuff in the right direction in regards to that. Now, there are still major issues that do come to play with this next-gen car. Obviously, they haven't done it yet, but I think if they can't figure out this issue at this next-gen test, the biggest thing they need to do is kind of what Kevin Harvick said. They need to increase the horsepower. I think increasing the horsepower won't be the complete fix. I think that will fix a lot of these problems and issues. If you increase the horsepower up to 750 or even 7 or 70 horsepower, I think you in general are going to get better racing on these shorter tracks. In the package of 2021, with 750 horsepower on the short tracks and the road courses. So I think getting rid of that kind of stuff is going to fix those issues overall. Obviously, not every single track can be fixed because tracks like Bristol, they're still going to have the intermediate package running at that track. But in my honest opinion, they got to do something to fix these problems because no secret, like I said, the short track package has been a pretty big issue and a pretty big talking point and conversation, and they got to fix it. Again, it's a step-by-step process. It seems like we're kind of headed in the right direction, but again, I think if they can't get rid of the shifting, which I think they're going to try to eliminate the shifting, get rid of everything under the underbody, among other things, you got to get the horsepower up. The horsepower has been a big proponent thing that's come up in recent years, and I really hope NASCAR does decide to go ahead and increase the horsepower in the next-gen cars. I think that could be one of the things that completely fixes the issues and fixes these problems. So good to see that they're going to be doing this next-gen test. I just think at this particular point, they need to go ahead and increase the horsepower. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Dillon. Now, on the Door Bumper Clear podcast, which we'll be talking about Door Bumper Clear podcast a little bit later in this episode, they kind of talked a little bit about Austin Dillon. And Joel Edmonds, of course, worked ARCA on Roll, and I don't think Joel Edmonds has been a fan of Austin Dillon for a long time. He kind of said that he'll be running RCR before long. Freddie Kraft also chimed in and said, sooner than we think. Austin Dillon, of course, is the grandson of Richard Childress, and a lot of people have begun to speculate that Austin Dillon, in the not-so-distant future, may retire from full-time racing and take a managing role at Richard Childress Racing. And there's a couple things I will say. Austin Dillon does have a contract with Richard Childress Racing through 2025, currently at this moment. So how long do I think Austin Dillon is going to race? Well, I think 2025 will actually be Austin Dillon's final year in the NASCAR Cup Series. Let me explain. Number one, Richard Childress is not getting any younger. Richard is 78 years old. And at the end of 2025, Richard Childress will be 80 years old. Unless you're Roger Penske, most of the time NASCAR Cup Series owners do not continue at the age of 80 years old. They have younger people managing their roles. The other reason why I think 2025 could be the last year is Austin Hill. Austin Hill currently he's going to run the Xfinity Series for 2 more years with Richard Childress Racing in the number 21 car. And I think that could be a really big possibility. Austin Hill says he wants to go Cup racing in the future, but he did say it'll be at least 2 years he'll be in Xfinity before he makes the jump up. I think Austin Dillon also, despite the fact that I think he's a decent driver, he's a big reason why Kyle Busch is over at that team, and I think he would be a pretty good bring a really awesome and good managing role at the organization and at the team. So we're going to have to see what happens in regards to that, but it's interesting to hear that Austin Dillon maybe in the not-so-distant future could go ahead and retire from racing, which I think, let's be honest, I think there's a good chance of possibility that could end up happening in the not-so-distant future. So that is a story to keep an eye out on for sure if what's going to happen to Austin Dillon, but I think there's a good chance possibility that in the next couple of years, Austin Dillon is going to retire from the sport and go into the managing role at RCR. Now, Andy Peter, of course, could run a team, but he's not much younger than Richard Childress, so I don't think it's going to be long as well before we see Austin Dillon go ahead and just hang up the helmet and go into a managing role with Richard Childress. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tanner Gray. As it was officially announced yesterday that Tanner Gray will be returning to Tricon Garage in 2024, driving the number 15 truck once again. This is not surprising or shock me. Obviously, Tanner Gray is the grandson of one of the owners of the organization. I can't remember the guy's name exactly, but his grandfather is the owner of this organization. And Tanner Gray, of course, he's a champion of the NHRA. He's been a decent driver in trucks. He's not been the greatest, though, but you compare him to a guy like Corey Heim, he hasn't been fantastic. But this confirms now 3 drivers at Tricon Garage for 2024. Obviously, you do have Dean Thompson returning to the 5 truck next year, and Corey Heim, who we'll talk about at the end of this episode, is returning to the 11 truck as well. What are my expectations going into 2024 for Tanner Gray? Well, the goal for Tanner Gray going into 2024 is to make the playoffs. There's less competition going to be in the Truck Series next year. You've got Carson Osborne and Zane Smith moving up to the Cup Series in 2024. And you've also got Haly Deegan moving up to the Xfinity Series. And there could be other drivers in the Truck Series who could move up. Granted, you're going to have Christian Eckes next year, and you're also going to have Corey Heim back in the series. But I think the goal for Tanner Gray is to make the playoffs. He's got to start making the playoffs at some point. I think he does have talent, but he's got to do better in the Truck Series because, in my opinion, like I said, he hasn't done absolutely fantastic. I'm wishing the best of luck, though, going into 2024. This is a really good opportunity for him. I think he'll have a good and solid year. We'll see what he does going into the 2024 season. Nonetheless, he will return in 2024 to Tricon Garage. We'll see what happens, but he's going to return to the Tricon Garage organization in the 2024 NASCAR Truck Series season. Wishing him the best of luck. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jake Garcia and Grant Enfinger. Now, someone had asked the account Private Porno about where both those drivers are going to be going in 2024. And Private Porno responded about where these drivers could end up going in 2024. First, they mentioned that Jake Garcia may be headed to ThorSport Racing in 2024. And as for Grant Enfinger, he may be headed back to CR7 Motorsports in 2024. Let's first begin by talking about Grant Enfinger. This does not surprise or shock me. Grant Enfinger has driven for CR7 Motorsports before. He drove for the team back in the 2021 season, and that's a pretty reasonably good stats with the team and organization in 2021. And also remember, CR7 Motorsports is going to be getting GMS Racing equipment because GMS Racing is going to be shutting down. So this is not surprise or shock that he's likely headed to the CR7 Motorsports organization. I know people mentioned he may head to Nice Motorsports next year, but it sounds like at this point he may be headed back to CR7 Motorsports in 2024. As for Jake Garcia, this would be a very interesting move and will be an upgrade compared to Haly Deegan. Jake Garcia had drove for McAnally Hilliman Racing in 2023 and also part-time in 2022. And I have to say, Jake Garcia did a very solid job with the team and organization. I think Jake Garcia is a very talented driver who can get the best out of equipment. He had a chance to make the playoffs this year in 2023, and I think he will have a potentially good year in 2024 if he truly does head to ThorSport Racing. Nonetheless, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to both these drivers, how they end up doing, but I think it'd be really cool seeing them both succeed, and we'll see what ends up happening going into the 2024 NASCAR Truck Series season. It sounds like we may see Jake Garcia with ThorSport and Grant Enfinger with CR7 Motorsports. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brennan Poole. As it was officially announced yesterday late morning that Brennan Poole will join Alpha Prime Racing in 2024, driving the number 44 car. This is a really great opportunity for Brennan Poole. Brennan Poole this past year has driven for JD Motorsports, driving the number 6 car, has had some pretty solid runs with JD Motorsports in 2023. Now, is Alpha Prime Racing the fastest organization in the world? No, absolutely not. But this is a fantastic and a great opportunity for Brennan Poole going into 2024. I believe Max Solutions is going to sponsor Brennan Poole for 20 races next year. I think he's fully funded going into 2024. It's already been announced that Ryan Ellis is going to drive the 43 car, and Brennan Poole, of course, will be in the 44. Now, I think this 44 car won't be as much in danger in owners' points as the 43 car is going into next year, but I think this, like I said, is a great opportunity for Brennan Poole. Now, I think Brennan Poole would deserve a top opportunity like a Kaulig Racing organization, but Alpha Prime Racing, they're building something going into next year because, like I've already said, Ryan Ellis is going full-time with their team going into 2024. I'm really looking forward to it. We'll see what happens going to 2024, see how Brennan Poole does. But again, a huge opportunity for Brennan. I think he's going to do really, really well with this team going to 2024, and I think he will have a pretty solid year. So nonetheless, really awesome and fantastic opportunity going to 2024, and we'll see what happens. I think Brennan Poole gets a couple top 15s. I don't expect Brennan Poole to contend for a lot of top 10s. He may get 1 or 2 occasional top 10s in 2024, but to be honest, my expectations have to be a little bit realistic. They're not the fast organization in the world, but I think he'll have a solid year with Alpha Prime, and nonetheless, glad to see that he'll be joining the Alpha Prime Racing family in the 2024 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney and Ross Chastain. Now, I believe it was on Wednesday, there was a report that came out from Bob Pockers, who actually talked to Ryan Blaney on the Empire State Building during Ryan Blaney's media tour that he was having after winning the championship. And Bob Pockers asked Ryan Blaney about his thoughts about him and Ross Chastain racing really hard and some of the comments that were made. Now, Ryan Blaney did respond to Bob's question, and he says they were joking after the race, and Ryan says that he congratulated Ross Chastain on winning the race, and Ross Chastain congratulated Ryan Blaney on winning the championship. Now, If you watch the NASCAR Cup Series Championship race that took place, Ross Chastain and Ryan Blaney were battling very, very hard for the win and battling really hard for the victory. And throughout that time, you saw Ryan Blaney getting really frustrated and upset with Ross Chastain with the way that he was racing him. Now, obviously, Ryan Blaney, of course, is trying to win the championship, but that was the most emotion I have seen Ryan Blaney show as a driver in the NASCAR Cup Series, which is really cool to see Ryan Blaney show emotion, because Ryan Blaney is an emotional guy. Sometimes you listen to his radio, he kind of does have a short fuse and a short temper with the way he's raced. He had a little bit of short temper fuse, I think it was with Denny Hamlin at Marshall the previous week as well. So it is cool to see that they were joking with each other after the race, and again, they're both really good drivers, and of course, Ross Chastain, his goal is to try to go out and win the race and try to get the victory. He wants to win for his sponsors and wants to win for the companies, especially since this is Kevin Harvick's final race. And of course, he's picking up Busch Beer going to 2024. I think every driver should race that way to try to get a win and trying to get a victory. So nonetheless, it's really interesting to see that there's no issues between both those guys, and I'm glad they moved on from it, and I'm glad that they're happy with each other. And they were, like I said, they were joking after the race. It's the emotions. They're trying to win a championship, and Ross is trying to end the year off on a really awesome and a really, really good note. So nonetheless, really awesome to see that both drivers are in a good position in their careers. They're not mad at each other, and glad to see that both drivers don't have really any beef with each other after the situation. They can be happy and joke about it after. I think it's really awesome stuff. And again, I'm glad to see there's no beef between both of them, and glad to see that they can absolutely move on from that situation, and they can move on to trying to race each other with a lot of respect out on the racetrack. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Blaney and Ross Chastain once again. Now, there's been a little bit of controversy in regards to the situation between the spotters. So on Door Bumper Clear, I believe it was originally said by Brett Griffin that apparently a NASCAR official went up to Ross Chastain's spotter, Brennan McReynolds, trying to basically tell him to, I think it was, back off, if I'm not mistaken. And Brennan McReynolds responded to that official saying that he is trying to win the race. Joel Edmonds kind of agreed with Brett Griffin, but kind of had a little bit of a different opinion on the situation that Brett Griffin said, basically trying to de-escalate the situation, especially for the battle for the championship. Then, after all this came out, Phil Surgeon came on, and he said that what that Brett Griffin and Joel Edmonds kind of said was not entirely true. Then you have Mike Ford, who is the senior communications director for NASCAR, coming on and basically saying that what said at DBC was not truthful at all. And he says that he went to de-escalate any unnecessary confrontations between both spotters, of course, Ryan Blaney spotter Josh Williams, and Brennan McReynolds, the spotter of Ross Chastain. Obviously, this has been a huge debate and conversation because a lot of people were talking about the way that Ross Chastain and Ryan Blaney were racing against each other. And obviously, you had the spotters, I think, getting a little upset and frustrated with each other. But the fact that Door Bumper Clear is not being completely truthful doesn't surprise or doesn't shock me, to be honest with you. And here's why I think what they said was a little bit untruthful. Obviously, NASCAR, with the championship race, they want to keep the integrity of the race itself going. And the goal of every driver in the field is to win the race. I personally don't think Ross Chastain did anything wrong. I know a lot of people said he did something wrong by racing Ryan Blaney hard, but guess what? Ross Chastain is trying to win a race for not only his sponsors, but for a lot of people as well, and trying to end the year off on a really good note for this organization and for this team. Track us had an up and down year this year, and he wants to win. He had the fastest car in the race. He's not going to hold back to go out to win. A lot of times we've never seen this before, where you see drivers go out and race the guys. Don't usually race the guys very, very hard. We go back to last year where Ryan Blaney did not pass Joey Logano for the win in the race. And I think that did hurt, and Ryan Blaney was not happy about it. He wanted to go to win the race, but I think he was told by his crew to back off and not affect the outcome of the championship. And I think that we are going to see more of this going forward. I think we look at Ross Chastain. I think every driver should race the way Ross Chastain did, because Ross Chastain, in my opinion, did nothing wrong. He raced Ryan Blaney clean, and he raced him fair. And if people are upset about that, well, hey, guess what? You're racing for a championship, and you're racing for wins and bragging rights as well at the end of the year. Again, we already talked about the fact that Ryan Blaney and Ross Chastain don't really have any issues about it anymore. He basically said that Ryan Blaney said that Ross Chastain, he ran it back him like a few times because he ran him like 10 times in the race. I think obviously the goal of everyone is to win. And the fact that spotters kind of trying to accuse NASCAR of manufacturing is a little bit frustrating. But again, we have a manufacturer system anyways, we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see that we saw a little bit of tension. This is a big talking point that got brought up. It kind of hurts the integrity of the sport if they truly told him to calm down and told him, but it sounds like at this point that was not completely truthful at all. Obviously, Brett Griffin, I don't think was even up on a tower anymore. Joel Edmonds was, but we know Brett Griffin hasn't been up there full time in a long time, so sometimes you have to question his integrity a little bit and what exactly they're talking about. Nonetheless, very interesting thing to talk about, especially going into offseason about the integrity of this championship. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Munoz. Now, this is kind of a little bit of debacle that went over the weekend, but it sounds like, according to reports, that Frankie Munoz is expected to head over to RSS Racing in the 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. Now, RSS Racing has denied these claims and these rumors that have come out, and Frankie has said that he's never heard that one before. However, when it comes to Frankie Munoz, there's been rumors and reports, like I said, over the last few weeks, that he's going to be headed up, moving up to the Xfinity Series full-time in the 2024 year. Now, what are the expectations of Frankie Munoz if he does truly head to RSS Racing in 2024? Well, I think the expectations are going to be a little bit high because he's a guy who's ran okay in ARCA. He actually had some good runs in ARCA this year. He led the points for a portion of the year. And he did end up finishing fourth in the standings, and of course, Retta Jones Racing, I think, is a big reason for that. Let's be perfectly honest when it comes to Retta Jones Racing. They are not the fastest organization in the world. So it doesn't surprise and shock me that he did have some struggles in 2023 with Retta Jones. Had a lot of mechanical issues near the end of the year, had a lot of flat tires, and of course, had a lot of issues on the racetrack of people wrecking him and getting involved in conflicts and wrecks throughout the year. Nonetheless, if he does go to RSS Racing, your expectations do have to be pretty reasonable. But he's going to be joining a pretty interesting rookie class next year if he truly does go to RSS Racing, because he's going to be joining drivers like Haly Deegan, will be with AM Racing full-time, and Jesse Love next year. So you're going to have potentially three rookies, and even maybe Roger Kroeger as well if he does go Xfinity Racing next year. You're going to have a really interesting rookie lineup going in 2024, and also SVG is going to be in Xfinity on a part-time basis. We're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen, and we'll see him next year run in the Xfinity Series. I think this is going to be a very interesting lineup next year, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens if Frankie does truly go there in 2024. Do I think he's going there? We're going to have to kind of wait and see. I think it's kind of like a wait-and-see kind of game. The announcement is expected to be coming in the next 2 weeks in regards to that. I do think it will probably be next week we get announced, probably for Thanksgiving, but it sounds like Frankie will be there. The question will be, what number is he going to run? I think he either runs the 38 or the 28. Those are numbers of the RSS Racing organization. We already know Ryan Sieg is returning to the 39 car next year, with SciAps as a full-time sponsor next year. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see what happens, and we'll keep an eye on the story as time goes on. But it does sound like at this particular moment that Frankie Munoz may be headed over to RSS Racing in the 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. He'll be joining a lead class with a lot of major silly moves that have been happening. We'll see what happens when it comes to Frankie Munoz, though, going into 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Phoenix TV ratings and the NASCAR TV ratings in general for 2023. As according to Austin Hannity from Motorsports Wire, he reports that the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix earned 2.92 million average viewers on NBC last weekend. That was down 9.1% compared to last year, which had 3.213 million viewers. And a big reason why that number was flat last year is because of the Hail Mary move that take place. That is a massive, massive drop when it comes to the final race of the year. Now, why were the TV ratings down for this championship race? Well, one of the biggest reasons is the Chase Elliott effect. Chase Elliott, of course, no longer in the Owners' Points Championship and didn't even make the playoffs this year, so less people are going to tune in. And you think about some of the drivers that did not make the Championship 4 this year. You didn't have a Kyle Busch in the Championship 4. You didn't have Bubba Wallace in the Championship 4 this year. You didn't have Ross Chastain, who won the race, in the Championship 4. You didn't have, like I said, Chase Elliott competing in there. You didn't have Mark Truex Jr. You didn't have Denny Hamlin. You didn't have a lot of big names and a lot of big firepower. Brad Keselowski, another name I mentioned, and Chris Buescher. You didn't have a lot of that big firepower, a lot of big fan bases in there. The only two big fan bases that really were there were Ryan Blaney's and Kyle Larson's. And Kyle Larson being your most polarizing driver, one of his most popular drivers, isn't the greatest thing in the world. But the other reason is because a lot of people don't like the one-race championship. I think it's pretty clear at this point that the one-race championship is not completely working. I think a lot of fans, including myself, believe that instead of having one race to decide the championship, we should have 3 races differently for decide the champion of the sport. which kind of talks a little bit about the overall TV ratings in 2023. We got a report last week, I believe it was from Adam Stern, that before this race, I think we were down 5.5% of the viewership for 2022. I think we're down about 4.5 or around 5% for the whole entire year. Now, what are the major factors to NASCAR's drop in ratings? Obviously, the championship format is definitely a major factor. I think a lot of people do not like this championship format, and I think a lot of people love a traditional points format where we go from every single race. You look at Formula One and their increase, and you have a lot of younger fans tuning in as well. Another big thing is the TV broadcast. I think the broadcast, while they have gotten better on NBC over time, I think the TV broadcasts do play a major point. But another big reason that I've seen a lot of people bringing up is marketability. I think this actually is one of the biggest reasons why you're seeing less people tune in. Let's look at Ryan Blaney's championship week, for instance. There has not been a ton of marketability for Ryan Blaney. Granted, Ryan Blaney's been on Kelly and Mark, with Kelly, Ripa, and Mark as well. He's been on some other shows as well, but he hasn't been on like the big shows like the Today Show or on YouTube like the Pat McAfee Show, which gets hundreds of thousands of people who tune in on a week-by-week basis and 10,000 people who tune in every single live stream. He hasn't been on like any big ESPN shows or other big shows like First Take, among other things that do have a younger demographic of people watching. He hasn't been on podcasts like the 5 Points podcast, which gets thousands of people who tune in that podcast as well. I think if you had an opportunity to market these drivers better and have them on shows like SNL, I think the sport would grow a lot more. And I think that NASCAR has not done a very good job marketing their drivers. And I think that in general has hurt the sport in a lot of ways. And NASCAR's marketing department in general, in my personal opinion, needs a complete overhaul going into the 2024 year and in the near future. We need to market these drivers a lot better. Not just market the races themselves, but market your big stars. Market your champion Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace, Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, who I think is known by a lot of people, Ross Chastain I mentioned. A lot of these guys need to be marketed here going next year. Hell, market some of your younger guys like Ty Gibbs, Zane Smith, and Carson Osbar going to 2024. Though a lot of people probably don't want to market Carson at this point. But you've got to market these younger drivers, and you got to market the younger guys. I think we have a lot of great drivers, and some of these guys have great personalities that don't show it because they're kind of like corporate and all that kind of stuff. But I think if you marketed them better and let them go do what they want to do, I think you would see a lot better look for the sport long term. So I think marketing is a big reason that needs to be changing, and we'll see what NASCAR does decide to do in regards to that. But I think the marketing side of things is a major reason why the sport is in a little bit of trouble. So we'll see what happens if NASCAR can market these drivers going into the future. I think it's something to keep an eye on, absolutely for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. As NASCAR has officially announced on Wednesday that Corey Heim has been fined $12,500 and docked 25 points for his actions at Phoenix. For those of you who did not pay attention to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, right before the end of the race, around 30 laps ago, Carson Osbar would get into Corey Heim in turn number 1, and it would collect Stuart Friesen. Carson Osbar was remorseful, basically in car, was really upset with himself, and Corey Heim revealed on the radio that said, I am going to get him before the end of this race. With 3 laps to go, Grant Infinger was cruising to a championship, and you could see that Corey Heim was backing up more and more, and then he would go and retaliate against Carson Osbar and would put him in the outside wall, and this would unfortunately take Taylor Gray out of contention of the race as well because of that. That is why Corey Heim was penalized, which in my opinion what Corey Heim did, as much as I think Corey Heim and Everett will get in that second, but I'm not really surprised or shocked to see that Corey Heim is getting penalties. Now, Carson Osbar, as much as I think he probably should have received some penalties for causing some of the actions as well, I think with him being remorseful for his actions, I think that's why NASCAR did not penalize him. Even though I think Carson Osbar started the situation, he kind of got off a little bit scotch-free. As for Corey Heim, look, Corey Heim had every right to be upset and frustrated with Carson Osbar. And he should be upset and frustrated with him still because Corey Heim was easily going to cruise to that championship, and Carson Osbar made a little bit of a bonehead and stupid mistake running into the back of him. There's no excuse for what Carson Osbar did, even though I think that he was truly meaning that he felt like crap about what happened. He's got to learn there's no excuse for it, and he has a pretty negative reputation, unlike Corey Heim. Even though probably some drivers aren't happy with Corey Heim for the way that he acted. But the reason that Corey Heim got a penalty is what he is retaliating it not only affected him because he wrecked himself and Carson Osbar and his teammate, but it affected the outcome of the championship as well, because Grant Infinger, like I said, was easily going to win the 23 NASCAR Truck Series Championship after what happened. Corey Heim affects it, and unfortunately, Grant Infinger gets a ton of damage, gets involved in a wreck, and Ben Rhodes scoots away and wins the championship. So Grant Infinger got completely robbed. That's why Corey Heim got penalized. Now, Corey Heim obviously probably wants to retaliate because he's got nothing left to lose at this point. They're not going to be racing against each other next year because Carson Osbar is moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024 to drive for Spire Motorsports. But again, Corey Heim caused a ton of restarts to take place, which I think what Corey Heim, like I said, he did was absolutely worse than what Carson Osbar did. Again, he affected the outcome of the championship. He caused a lot of chaos that took place, a lot of big wrecks, and it continued to be one of the biggest farces. Now, NASCAR said that they are going to address this situation heads on in the coming weeks. Ellen Sawyer has said that they're going to make a decision on what they're going to do. I think one of the things for the Truck Series, get rid of the playoff format and just have a full season points format to avoid a situation like this. You have a lot of young kids in the Truck Series right now that are not mentally tough, who are not mentally good enough. Well, they're good, but they're not good. They're young. I mean, look at this. Corey Heim is 21 years old, born in 2002, and Carson Osbar is 20 years old. These guys are racing for a championship. Back when the Truck Series was great, in my opinion, you had a lot of more veterans racing in the sport. You had guys like your Matt DiBenedetto's racing in the series. You had guys like Ron Hornaday Jr. You had drivers like Johnny Sauter racing, even though Johnny wasn't the most effective driver. Back in even 2021, you had guys like Austin who were in their upper 20s. Sheldon Creed racing in the series. You had guys, of course, like Todd Bodine racing back in the day. You had a lot more of those veteran guys who were out on the racetrack. And if you mess with those guys, like Matt Crafton as well, you were going to get in a lot of trouble for that. And you may get into a fight as well after the race as well with these guys, because they were not going to take your crap and they were not going to put up with it. The problem right now is a lot of these kids coming in don't have the biggest respect in the world, and it causes chaos and shit like this. So in my opinion, I think NASCAR made the right decision. I think that one of the things they could also do is short track rules. If you get involved in an incident, you go to the back of the pack. Therefore, it cleans up a lot of these issues, and a lot of the crap gets cleaned up immediately because of this. So I think NASCAR absolutely made the right call and right decision in regards to that to penalize Corey Heim. They maybe should have penalized Carson as well, but in my opinion, I think NASCAR absolutely made the justifiable and right call and went ahead, and I think it was the right call to go ahead and penalize him for that, because in my opinion, what they did was unacceptable and is not acceptable, in my honest opinion, what Corey Heim did. I think he's had a right to be upset and frustrated, but in my opinion, that was a little bit over the top from Corey Heim, especially affecting the outcome of the championship. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ty Dillon. Now, there has been a lot of speculation in regards to who's going to be taking over his 16 Cup car in 2024. Well, according to Dale Jr., he might have spilled the beans on his final Dale Jr. Down episode, which by the way was confirmed that Mike Davis is no longer going to be a co-host next year in 2024. But Dale Jr. might have accidentally spilled the beans that Ty Dillon is headed over to the 16 Cup car for Kaulig Racing in 2024. As we now know, it sounds like expected that he's headed over there next year. This does not surprise or shock me that Ty Dillon is likely headed to Kaulig Racing in 2024. It's obviously been rumored that he's going to head there in 2024. Look, do I think that Ty Dillon deserves to be in a 16 Cup car next year? No, absolutely not. I think he fit better in the Xfinity Series. Ty Dillon, I think, would actually be somewhat competent in Xfinity, and I think he would do a decent job with Kaulig Racing. But he has funding and sponsorship from Ferris Motors. And Matt Call has said this publicly. He doesn't want to keep funding his team out of pocket. That's why Justin Haley is no longer at Kaulig Racing in the 2024 season. And instead is going to be with Rickware Racing next year because he doesn't have the biggest funding and the biggest sponsorship money going into next year. So that's a pretty massive reason why a guy like Ty Dillon is going to 16. Again, I prefer AJ Allmendinger to be in a 16 car next year. But again, funding and sponsorship comes into play. Now, the good news is for AJ Allmendinger fans is AJ is still going to be racing in NASCAR. He just won't be full-time in the Cup Series. He'll be in the Xfinity Series more than likely going into 2024, probably in that 16 car, because we already know at this point that Chandler Smith is likely headed over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024 with Sheldon Creed as well as a teammate next year. So that 16 car is going to be available, which of course AJ drove the 16. I think he will be way more successful in the Xfinity Series than he has been in Cup, but it's not like AJ Allmendinger has really been that bad this year. AJ got a win this year at the Roval and did compete for the playoffs for a majority of the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. It was 23 season. He was really competitive and showed a lot of pace and a lot of speed. It's just a shame that funding and sponsorship comes into play, but AJ, of course, will do whatever Matt and Chris tell him to do. Now, when is this announcement expected to come out? It's probably going to be coming out in the coming weeks. It's just, like I said, a shame to see that Ty Dillon's going to be there now. What are my expectations for Ty Dillon going into 2024? I'm going to be honest with you guys. My expectations are not very high for Ty Dillon going into 2024. I think realistically, Ty Dillon may get one top 10 all year, and it might be at a super speedway. I think the rest of the year, Kaulig's going to in general struggle. I think that they're going to be the team that I think has the worst year, even worse than Stewart-Haas Racing. And I would not be surprised or shocked if Ty Dillon finishes outside the top 30 in points. Especially if how bad they ran at Phoenix. They were way off the pace. They ran like 30th and 31st all day long. That gives me a little bit worried for this team going to 2024. Now, I do believe that Daniel Hemrick is going to run better than Ty Dillon next year. I think he will be at least a little more competent. I think that you'll see Daniel Hemrick show some decent pace in speed next year. But you look at Kaulig Racing just from a few years ago, and you look how strong this team was in 2021. They got a win in the Cup Series with AJ Allmendinger. They were contending for a championship in Xfinity. Jeb Burton got a win with this team. Justin Haley got a couple wins in 2021. And then, of course, you had AJ Allmendinger, who was a championship threat with this team. And last year in 2022, they started fading in Xfinity, but Allmendinger still was a playoff contender and a playoff threat with this team and organization, and they were somewhat competitive in the Cup Series. Justin Haley had a chance to make the playoffs. AJ Allmendinger competed pretty well in the Cup Series. And in 2023, they showed some good pace and speed in Cup as well, especially near the end of the regular season and near the end of the year. And they were at so much hype around this team. And they're losing Chandler Smith, one of their future drivers. They've lost Justin Haley, and now their Allmendinger is going to be demoted down to Xfinity. Now, going to their Xfinity program, let's talk about that for a second. Obviously, AJ Allmendinger sounds like he's likely headed to the Xfinity Series with this team next year. The big question is, who's going to be his teammates? There are potentially a lot of candidates. You have a guy like Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto could head there next year. He's working on his plans for 2024, and he's got some partners, apparently, that he's working with. So I can see Matt DiBenedetto going over to Kaulig Racing in 2024. Another driver could be Derek Kraus. Derek Kraus has been linked to Kaulig Racing for the 2024 season, so it sounds like there's a good potential possibility that we could see Derek Kraus with Kaulig Racing in 2024. And then you've also got a guy like Lane Riggs who could go there next year. I think Lane Riggs is a very, very talented driver, and I think he would do it pretty solid and be pretty competent with the team going into 2024. I think he'd have a pretty solid and good year and would show some pretty good pace and pretty good speed as well. There's other drivers I like seeing the future drive for this team, like Shane Van Gisbergen. And I also think Shane Van Gisbergen does have a chance, possibility, to drive part-time with this team. We know that Justin Marks has kind of said that a lot of next year, we're going to see Shane probably a lot of next year in the Xfinity Series. We don't really know what his schedule is going to look like. He's probably going to run all the road courses. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see him run the Daytona 500 in 2024 as well, if he does get approved for that. I think it's interesting, though, to see what happens, but it sounds like at this point that Ty Dillon is going to be in the 16 car next year, and like I said, I'm just not looking forward to that. I don't think Ty Dillon's going to have a good year, to be honest with you. I think he's going to struggle in quite a few ways, and I don't think it's going to be a great year for Ty Dillon next year. He really hasn't done much in Cup. I think this will be his last opportunity and chance. Again, because Ty Dillon's 31 years old. He's getting a little older at this point and hasn't really done much. He keeps getting good rides because he's got funding and sponsorship. That's a big reason for that. So we'll see how Ty Dillon does, but at this particular point, I'm not really expecting much, but it sounds like at this particular moment of point that Ty Dillon is headed over to Kaulig Racing in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season, and I'm not really looking forward to that, to be honest with you. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links to more of that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Ty Dillon potentially heading to Kaulig Racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think the penalty for Corey Heim was justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have a video talking about the top 20 drivers to watch out for in 2024. Then on Sunday, you're either going to see a 2025 NASCAR silly season predictions or the 2024 NASCAR winter predictions dropping on the channel. Monday, you're going to start seeing some team previews drop on the channel. There's a lot of other great content dropping on the channel as well. Got a lot of great content dropping the next couple weeks that I can't wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.